From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
A garden of hope.
You know, food is medicine. So if our bodies can be healed by what we eat.
How one man is helping feed a city, preventing a tragedy.
Whatever it needs to be done, you're going to save an awful lot of grain.
How a little prep work could help prevent you from ever having to walk inside a grain bin. As beef exports reach another milestone.
And while the international logistical situation appears to be improving, it's definitely not back to normal.
The challenges that lie ahead right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Despite various headwinds, the latest red meat export totals show a big month for U.S. beef exports, which hit another record, topping $1 billion in July. Now, by value, that's also up 7% compared to a year ago. Volume was also 3% higher versus 2021 and nearly 127,000 metric tons. Now, this is the fifth largest volume on record, according to data from USDA. The U.S. Meat Export Federation officials cite broad-based growth in key markets for the record.
Japan was up 8%. China continues with growth of about 30%. Some markets like the Philippines as well that were strong. And back in this part of the world, the Caribbean and Central America saw growth. That's in the face of some pretty significant headwinds. The U.S. dollar continues to strengthen against some of our key currencies, specifically Japan and Korea. And that's something to keep an eye on. And while the international logistical situation appears to be improving, it's definitely not back to normal. We have some additional work to do there.
July pork exports remained below last year's pace by 6%, but continue to gain strength in several markets, including Mexico, Colombia, and South Korea. Hallstrom notes that while July exports to China, Hong Kong were lower than a year ago, shipments were the largest of 2022. This indicates that China's demand for imported pork is rebounding to some degree. The value of all U.S. exports is also on the rise. USDA reporting they've climbed at an average rate of 6% since 2002, reaching a record high of $1.4 trillion in 2021. Now, last year, ag exports accounted for 12% of that total value. That's up 9% from 2002. Researchers say even as total U.S. exports fell during the onset of COVID, ag exports remained steady on the strength of surging shipments of soybeans, corn, and pork to China. Looks like the West could be in for more rain, while other parts of the country that could use some moisture before harvest are missing out. Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik has an update.
That's right, Clinton. We're going to be looking at a little bit of unsettled weather there in the West and especially the Pacific Northwest with a little bit more rain. You take a look at the map here, and we're looking at above average moisture there for the rest of this week and into the weekend out in the West. And even some rain dealing with that in the northern plains states, parts of the upper Midwest. But most of the country, at least the eastern half of the country, going to be extremely dry. As we start out this forecast on Monday, you can tell that we are going to be looking at some unsettled weather. Parts of the Ohio Valley, parts of the Northeast. That's because the system kind of moving up into Canada has that cold front sweeping on through. There's still some unsettled weather down in Florida as we watch Tropical Storm Fiona off the East Coast, and then hot and humid through the middle part of the country. And you can see that ridge building right through the middle of the country. It is going to keep right where it is as we head all the way through this week. Starting to break down a little bit by the weekend with some cooler air filtering into the Northeast, but overall a relatively warm and muggy pattern is setting up with some unsettled weather along the northern tier. And a rainbow after the rain. Jason Cloud in Union, Michigan sharing this one, and that's quite a catch on camera. And we love the last name too, Jason. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
Russia's attack on Ukraine has destroyed or damaged more than 14% of the country's crop storage. The number comes from a U.S. government-backed report. Researchers with Conflict Observatory examining satellite images of 344 storage facilities out of almost 1,400 nationwide. They conclude that Ukraine's grain storage capacity fell to 49.8 million metric tons, down from a pre-war capacity of 58 million metric tons. They've also determined most of the facilities with damage were located along train routes, shipping ports, or both. But grain is continuing to leave the region. The UN reporting food exports from both Ukraine and Russia have increased since the the July grain deal was made. But it says critically needed fertilizer exports from Russia are still down despite the agreement. Insurance, financing, and shipping remain issues. The UN trade chief saying she's concerned about fertilizer exports needed by October to November for the Northern Hemisphere planting season. Now, she warned of a catastrophic crisis if fertilizer remains unaffordable for many.
Close Calls, Stories of Survival on AgDay is brought to you by AGI. AGI offers complete systems and solutions with industry-leading products to meet your needs. AGI has you covered. To learn more, visit aggrowth.com.
Fall harvest is getting underway, and it's a good time to remind farmers to give their grain some extra love as they put it into storage. As we continue our series, Close Calls, Stories of Survival, AgDay's Michelle Rook looks at how this can also potentially save lives.
Clinton, every year we hear of accidents involving farmers that are entrapped in grain bins as they're trying to dislodge spoiled grain. However, these incidents can be prevented if farmers keep stored grain in good condition. Plus, with the current grain prices, there is certainly a financial incentive to do it as well. As leader of the Purdue Ag Safety and Health Program, Bill Field has spent the last 40 years documenting farm accidents across the country, including grain entrapments. He says the resounding theme in all these cases is that they could have been easily avoided with proper grain management practices.
There's a direct correlation between out of condition or spoiled grain and the increased probability of someone becoming entrapped. They're actually trying to work in some way to get the grain out of storage. It's crusted, it's moldy, it plugs, and so people get in there and they fight with it to try to get it out, and that's when they get in trouble.
Field says harvesting grain and storing it too wet can cause it to spoil and crust in the bin. So farmers need to dry crops down to 15% moisture or below, and that level needs to be maintained while the grain is in storage.
You can store it for short periods of time above that level, but if you're keeping it in there for several months, or you have some really warm weather in the late fall, that activity is going to increase. You're going to have more insect activity, and that's why it needs to be down there below 14 or 15%.
Once grain is put in storage, he says farmers need to monitor the bins regularly and run air through the grain to keep it at the proper moisture and temperature. However, it only takes a few days for grain to spoil, and when that happens, farmers must work quickly.
Grain begins to warm up, it's spoiling, it produces heat, and if you can monitor that before it gets too bad and start moving grain out of that storage space, getting it utilized, getting it shipped off to market, whatever it needs to be done, you're going to save an awful lot of grain.
By keeping grain in proper condition, he says farmers won't have to enter the bins to try to salvage or move spoiled product, thus preventing a potentially costly and deadly entrapment. Proper grain storage management also prevents grain from losing value from dockage at the elevator, which cuts into farmers' profits. Now, for more information, you can go to Purdue Extension's Ag Confined Spaces website.
All right, thanks, Michelle. And another danger on the farm, grain dryers. Todd Boyd of Pinetown, North Carolina, is sharing this video on Twitter. He says no one was hurt and adds there was a great response from the local volunteer fire department and EMS. Now, he says they're still working to see what caused it. Markets ending the week mixed. We'll dig into the outlook for the week ahead. Coming up next in analysis. And later, meet a Tennessee man focused on providing healthy food to folks in the city. It's Reggie's Veggies in the country. Soybeans started the week with huge gains, but ended the week rather ho-hum. Michelle Rook is back with this morning's market report on what we're watching this week.
Well, Friday's market closes were mixed. Joining us to visit about that in the week ahead, as far as market analysis, Alan Brugler with Brugler Marketing. And later part of the week last week, we really got caught up in the macroeconomic climate, money flow. Is that going to be the case all this week now as we go into this Fed meeting, Alan?
I think that's pretty likely because we are dependent on the speculative buying in the commodities. That money likes to be in the stock market when the stock market's performing well, but the stock market's, as you mentioned, very concerned about the Fed rate hike and what that does to particularly the highly leveraged companies.
What does this mean for commodities, though, overall? Does the commodity market have to sell off if the equities do?
No, it does not. You're going to have some commodities like cotton that are a little more sensitive to consumer spending that demand will get hit worse if there's a recession caused by the Fed's moves to control inflation. But you have to remember that even if the Fed raises rates 75 or even 100 basis points, we're still going to have negative real interest rates for a while because the CPI was 8.3%, and you're still going to be 100 or 200 points even with the more conservative inflation measures. So this is still an inflationary environment at this point, and commodities generally perform well in an inflationary environment.
So do you think corn and soybeans have kind of printed their highs for the time being now from last week after the report, just because we have seasonals now working against us?
Well, we definitely have the seasonal tendency to go down the next 2 weeks. A couple of the trading firms that specialize in seasonality are talking about selling soybeans on Monday and buying them back on October 4th, that type of thing. You've got those traders out there. Fundamentally, though, we have to look at what the yield reports are that are coming out of the field. I think it's a little premature to worry about Brazilian planting progress and Brazilian weather, but some people will start to float those themes as well.
So has wheat just been seeing a little technical recovery, or is it worried about weather and winter wheat planting?
I think the bigger story there is actually the Putin-Erdogan meeting, which happened on Friday, and whether or not there was going to be an interruption to the export program out of Ukraine.
Okay.
The world needs that wheat.
All right, thanks so much. Alan Brugler with Brugler Marketing, and we have more Ag Day coming up.
To talk to Alan about his ag market professional services, call Brugler Marketing and Management at 402-697-3623 or visit his website, www.bruglermarketing.com.
Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik joining us here, taking a look at our drought monitor. And as we look at this, we keep watching for big changes, and it's just been a real slow progression.
It has, and we've seen a little bit of improvement there, Southern California and in parts of the West, but still looking at unsettled weather in the West, so we could see some more improvements later on this week. And if you take a look at the drought monitor, you can really see still extremely dry in the middle part of the country. Places in the southern part of the Dakotas all the way down through Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and then back into Texas, where we saw a lot of rain at one point. Now things have dried out just a bit. And then looking back towards the Rockies, this is where we've seen a lot of those scattered showers and storms. Things got a little bit better here and in parts of the Southwest. Still watching for more unsettled weather across parts of the Northwest and the center part of the Rockies through this week. So that could help this drought just a little bit. Still some spots here in the eastern Corn Belt, parts of the Great Lakes still abnormally dry, and the same thing goes for places along the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Still dealing with a little bit of a drought there, moderate drought in southern portions of New England that we'll need to keep an eye on as well. But here's a look at the outlook for this week. The rest of this week, right along the Pacific coast there, that's where we're going to be below normal. But northern plains, northern Rockies, back into the Four Corners region, even parts of Nevada and California, likely going to be above average, and then below, really from the Plains states, Texas, all the way towards the East Coast. Not a lot of wet weather to be seen there. And here's a look at the precipitation this week. Again, not a whole lot going on in the east. We do have some, though, that will likely come through portions of New England, depending on the tracks of those storms, but then more moisture looking to come into the west, especially late this week and into the weekend, something we'll continue to keep an eye on. And there's a look at the temperatures this week. Rain in the west signifies temperatures near normal, but above normal and much above normal for parts of the south and the center part of the country as well. Temperatures next week, though, or precip next week, I should say, is going to be below normal across most of the country except the southwest and the east, where we'll see not a normal amount, and then above normal down in parts of Florida as those unsettled weather, that shower storm kind of pattern really keeps up. And there's a look at the temperatures next week, where we've got above normal southern half of the country, up the west coast, staying near normal though in parts of the eastern Corn Belt and up into New England. And we'll continue to track all that right here on Ag Day. That's a look around the country. Now let's take a look at the weather where you live. Columbus, Ohio, mostly sunny with afternoon storms possible, a high near 84 degrees. Heading to Altus, Oklahoma, sunny, hot, and humid, a high near 99. And Corning, California, scattered showers possible, a high around 75 degrees.
Coming up, Machinery Pete is scouring prices from coast to coast, looking to see if higher equipment prices are in just a few places or across the board. Next. The greatest economic threat to farmers right now, higher farm input costs. Now that's according to rural bankers surveyed as part of the latest Rural Main Street Index. The index falling for the 5th straight month, now at a reading of 46.3. That's up slightly from the August survey of 44. Ernie Goss of Creighton University saying farmers and bankers are bracing for increasing interest rates, higher farm input costs, and drought. Now one bright spot, farm equipment sales. After falling below growth neutral in August, the farm equipment sales index soared to 58 for September. We know prices for good used equipment are high right now, but is that the story as you go coast to coast? Machinery Pete has the answer.
Well, folks, all these years compiling auction sale prices, just over 3 decades now, I got to tell you, one of the funnest parts of the gig is compiling prices from different parts of the country, the U.S. or throughout Canada. And recently had a couple eye-opening auctions, one from the far northeast and one from the west coast. On a September 13th auction in Shapley, Maine, by the good folks at Keenan Auction Company, this 2021 Kubota MX6000 tractor with only 9 hours on it and a loader sold for $44,000. Now that's the highest auction price I've ever seen on a Kubota MX6000, just squeaking past one we saw sold last month, August 3rd, 2022 in Oklahoma at $43,500 with a loader. Now on that same auction in Maine, September 13th, this 2020 Kubota RTV X1100C UTV with 42.5 hours on it sold for $26,000, and that's the 3rd highest auction price I've ever seen on any Kubota ATV or UTV. Now the next day, September 14th, let's hop over to Ellensburg, Washington, where our friends at Booker Auction Company had a beautiful farm retirement auction. And a couple highlights on the sale was this really sharp 2009 Case IH Steiger 485 quad track, 2,271 hours on it, sold for $271,500. Folks, that's the 2nd highest auction price ever on a 485 quad track and the highest in almost 11 years. And then what really caught my eye in the sale was they had 5 Freeman 370 balers, including a pair of self-propelled. And the highest seller was this 97 model with 2,859 hours, sold for $55,500.
All right, coming up, one man's effort to help feed a city. How he's making his garden go a long way in the country.
Closed captioning on AgDay is brought to you by BASF. BASF, helping you do the biggest jobs on earth.
A Nashville man has a personal calling to grow healthy foods for people in need and to promote agriculture, especially in urban areas. Charles Denny shows us what Reggie's Veggies is all about.
This is kind of what you have underneath everything. You got cardboard and wood mulch.
Taking soil that was once rocky and unusable, Reggie Marshall now gets the most from this piece of land southeast of downtown Nashville. Here he grows a vibrant garden, healthy and delicious produce, beautiful tomatoes, peppers, okra, onions, and more.
You know, food is medicine. So if our bodies can be healed by what we eat.
Perhaps our spirit, too. Mr. Marshall takes great joy in sharing foods with people in need, a project that's come to be known as Reggie's Veggies. He's generous with both his vegetables and his knowledge, encouraging people to explore healthier living through the foods they grow and eat.
You know, I always say, if I'm having a good day, I don't want to be the only one. And the things that God's blessed me with, I want to share. Because the more I share, the more I get.
Reggie Marshall is a retired nurse, and he kind of got his start giving away produce to the staff at the hospital where he worked here in Nashville. Now his focus is on helping the whole community through food giveaways and teaching.
Reggie sometimes teams with Elizabeth Sanders with UT Extension in Davidson County. Here a class called Fresh Fridays, where they visit a Nashville apartment building downtown.
Both of us have very similar backgrounds, being raised on small farms and growing up in agriculture.
They co-teach how to make fried green tomatoes, and all the ingredients here came from Reggie's garden.
It's been really great to be able to pick up our materials and go directly to the people and partner together in that manner, giving them a moment and take a break in the moment of a cooking class and say, go out and gather your produce.
Reggie Marshall plans to go on helping others, looking to expand his garden, his veggies, a true farm to urban table effort. He and Elizabeth plan to teach canning classes and courses on traditional African American foods this fall. Good things grow when you combine smart farming with kindness. This is Charles Denny reporting.
All right, thanks, Charles. And that's all the time we have this morning. I'm sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great week out in farm country.